All right, good afternoon, all, and welcome to our panel on scaling ocean-based carbon removal. I'm Bella, an Associate Director with the Carbon Business Council. It's a pleasure to be here in Atlanta with you all today, and thanks to those tuning in online. I heard we have people joining from around the world. The Carbon Business Council is a nonprofit trade association dedicated to CDR startups. We're tech neutral, and we are excited about the variety of options that there are today for different CDR types. And I'm looking forward to talking about ocean-based CDR with our panelists today. As the world works towards a 1.5-degree future, this is an integral moment for climate action. And so with that, we'll be discussing startup innovation in this ocean-based CDR space, covering questions around scaling, bending the cost curve, and looking at how we can do it in a responsible and equitable fashion. So to start, I'd like to start by introducing our panelists. Steve, you want to raise your hand? Steve Oldham is the CEO of Captura. He joined after his former role as CEO at leading direct air capture company, Carbon Engineering. Pete Chargan is Vice President, oh, there you are, Pete, Vice President of Commercialization and Community Engagement for Planetary. His role acts as the intersection, working with the community and informing project deployment. Alex Ganya is the co-founder of Biennial Carbon, an associate professor of chemical oceanography at the University of Washington. Biennial uses sunlight and photochemistry to power a new form of carbon removal from direct removal from the ocean. Matt Eisman is the CTO and co-founder of Ebb Carbon. Matt, welcome. An associate professor at the Stony Brook University. He has spent the last decade developing technologies that capture CO2 from the air using the natural ocean atmosphere equilibrium. Max Chalfin is the Director of Research at Running Tide, where their mission is to restore the ocean for its health and productivity, rebalance the carbon cycle, decarbonize the global supply chains, and revitalize ocean communities. Lastly, Eric Kontag is the co-founder and chairman of Seafields and is passionate about building and operating sustainable digital infrastructures. So welcome all today. Thank you for being part of our panel. So to start us off, there are a diversity of pathways for ocean-based CDR. Let's begin by hearing a little bit more about each of the solutions presented today from the panelists themselves. Steve, let's start with you.
Okay, is that on? Yes, great. So good afternoon, everyone. So Steve Oldham from Captura. Our company was founded out of Caltech, University in California. We remove CO2 from the atmosphere via the medium of the ocean. We have no chemical additives, we have no absorbents, no byproducts. We use only renewable electricity and ocean water, and we extract a measurable stream of CO2, and then we rely on the natural order of things so that the ocean draws down an equivalent amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere. We did our Series A earlier this year. We have a fully working prototype in Newport Beach in California, and now for us the next steps are all scaling.
Thank you. Pete?
I'm Pete Chargan. I'm from Planetary Technologies. We were founded in 2019 and based in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Our process is pretty simple. It's exactly the same process that nature uses to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. If you think back to your basic high school chemistry, the air and the sea are in equilibrium in terms of carbon dioxide. But over the last couple hundred years, we've pumped 1 trillion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and much of that is seeped down into the ocean, making it more acidic. What's the best way to counteract acid? An antacid. So we add an antacid into the ocean, and when we do that, it consumes the dissolved carbon dioxide, which is carbonic acid, and it turns it into a carbonate or a bicarbonate. And then, just like the process from Captura, atmospheric CO2 seeps back down into the ocean. We are also in deployment modes. We have project sites around the world now. Ocean alkalinity enhancement is the name of the process, and it was named as one of the top areas of potential scaling, top pathways of potential scaling, and we believe that it can also be one of the lowest costs. We're hiring. We've sold out our 2023 credits, and we're selling our 2024 credits now.
Thank you. Great. And then
Hi, my name is Eric Kumtek. I'm sitting in for Dr. Mar Fernandez, who's our lead scientist at Seafields. At Seafields, we believe in harnessing the power of the oceans, and our vision is to build open ocean aqua farms at scale with the goal of sequestering at least a gigaton of carbon by the time that we have actually deployed our farms in the South Atlantic Gyre. And so the way that we do it is we cultivate sargassum, we harvest it, we go through a process that allows us to shred it, bale it, and then we sink the sargassum above the abyssal plain, so around 4,000-meter depth, where we can capture and sequester CO2 for, let's say, hundreds of years. Seafield was founded in 2021 by a series of entrepreneurs and scientists. We followed the vision of Dr. Victor Šimeček. And we've done a series of trials testing barriers, doing growth. We have a couple of upcoming trials in the Caribbean again this spring to try to demonstrate that we can actually domesticate sargassum. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the invitation. So ebb carbon is enhancing the ocean's ability to pull CO2 from the atmosphere and store it as oceanic bicarbonate and locally mitigate ocean acidification at the same time. We do that via ocean alkalinity enhancement, and we generate that alkalinity electrochemically. So we convert waste brine streams, waste that would just go to the ocean, intercept it, convert some of that brine, some of that salt, using low carbon electricity and ion selective membranes into alkalinity. And so what we return to the ocean is basically a brine that is slightly less salty and a little more alkaline, which results in CO2 removal and locally ocean acidification mitigation. Our systems are designed to be modular and plug and play, so we can plug into existing infrastructure and de-risk at low cost, and operate at about 50% capacity factor, and we can ramp that system on tens of seconds, which is important because we actually provide grid flexibility service that way. And then the last piece I'll add is sort of the innovation. One of the innovations Ebb is adding is on design and manufacture of that electrochemical system. So we'll design and manufacture our own stacks to drive the cost down. So right now, off the shelf is good enough. We started the process to design and manufacture our custom design, which will drive down OpEx because it's more energy efficient, and drive down CapEx just because it's much less expensive to manufacture.
Hi. Again, yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So Running Tide, at Running Tide, we focus on amplifying the open systems that naturally sequester carbon. So, working backwards from the goal of climate relevant scale carbon removal, we see carbon removal as a mass transfer problem. You have to move many billions of tons of material. So what is the most efficient way that we're going to be able to achieve that? We see that as using these open systems that exist in nature and amplifying them. So specifically, we move terrestrial biomass from forest systems and agriculture systems into the ocean, amplifying that ocean burial of photosynthetic biomass on land, and then we do that in a way where we stimulate the production of macroalgae, amplifying that photosynthetic fixing of carbon in the surface oceans as well.
Yeah, thanks. At Biennial Carbon, we're developing a fundamentally new and energy efficient and simple process for direct carbon removal from seawater. And what distinguishes our approach from some of the really promising electrochemical approaches that my colleagues are working on here on the stage is that we use sunlight as part of a chemical reaction to draw carbon dioxide out of seawater. So our process takes advantage of a really special class of molecules called reversible photoacids. And these reversible photoacids, when they absorb visible light, change their shape. And as they change their shape, they become much more acidic. And we could transfer that acidity to seawater to temporarily acidify seawater and in that process drive carbon dioxide out of the seawater. Now, because these photoacids are reversible, they relax to their ground state in the dark and can be reused many, many times through many cycles to continue to draw carbon dioxide out of seawater. The seawater that comes out of our process is unchanged, apart from the fact that we've extracted carbon dioxide from it. And the CO2 stream that we produce can be geologically sequestered or used in industrial processes where CO2 is a feedstock. And because we're directly removing carbon dioxide from seawater, we're producing a stream of CO2 that you can readily measure. Verification is relatively straightforward for our process compared to some other ones, as is demonstration of additionality. The photoacids that we use are easy to synthesize. They have no toxic metals or rare elements in them. And one really neat thing about these class of compounds is that they only use a portion of the sunlight spectrum that they react with. And that leaves a large portion of sunlight available for other processes. So we channel that sunlight to affordable solar cells, which allow us to generate electricity at the same time that we're removing carbon dioxide. And so this means that we net generate electricity even when you account for pumping of seawater with no additional land uses. So we have a working demonstration, proof of principle in the lab. We're laser focused on deploying this in the field under real world conditions in a sustained way as part of a field deployment. And Biennial Carbon is about a year old, started by co-founder Julian Sachs in the audience and me. We have a growing team of now 5 scientists and engineers. And Julian and I are actually faculty in chemical oceanography at the University of Washington, but we've taken a leave of absence to really dedicate our time to this project of Biennial Carbon because we really think that the technology that Biennial Carbon has that we're working on has the potential to radically reduce the cost of carbon removal, scale to global scale, and help transition the planet to a net zero carbon economy.
Thank you. Well, I'm energized by all these different solutions. I hope you are too. And it's always fun to learn more about like startups. And so with that, and now that we've heard about a variety of solutions, I'd like to ask Alex and Eric, can you maybe talk about some of the challenges that you see the industry is experiencing?
Thanks. Yeah, I think a major challenge that marine carbon dioxide removal community has is one of messaging. We need to understand and communicate to the world that carbon dioxide removal from the surface ocean, at least for the parts of the ocean that are in relatively rapid chemical exchange with the atmosphere, for these parts of the ocean, removing carbon dioxide from the surface ocean is effectively the same as carbon dioxide removal from the atmosphere. And to sort of talk about this or sort of explore this topic, I'm going to do a thought experiment with you that maybe approaches this from a little bit different angle than maybe you've done before. So imagine that you are operating a direct air capture facility, right? You've got it working, it's pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. If you do that, you remove this carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, it means that there'll be a deficit of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere with respect to equilibration with the surface ocean. And this means that the carbon dioxide in the surface ocean will burp back up a portion of it to replace that. Right? And so this means that this will reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that you think that you've removed, but it also means that when you conduct direct air capture, you're effectively pulling carbon dioxide not just from the atmosphere, but also from the ocean. So the sort of complementary approach, if you pull carbon dioxide from the surface ocean, well, then you'll leave a deficit of carbon dioxide there, and that will pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And so for the parts of the world's ocean where the surface ocean has enough time to equilibrate with the atmosphere, that's on timescales of months to years, or months to a year. For those places, equilibration is rapid enough that you can effectively think of that as being the atmosphere and surface ocean as being a single reservoir. And so pulling carbon dioxide from either the surface ocean or the atmosphere is effectively the same. And I think this is an important message to get across because explaining the equivalence of carbon dioxide removal from the surface ocean and the atmosphere is really necessary for us to see widespread adoption of carbon dioxide removal from seawater.
Wow, awesome. So I'm going to take a slight different approach to this. And I think there's at least 3 things that I'd like to focus on. I think the first one is I think it's a mindset issue. We have to move at speed and we got to move at scale. And so it's that 10x factor that needs to be built in. It needs to be built into the culture of our companies, needs to be built into anything we do. And there's not one solution fits all. So we need everybody's support because this is a true grand challenge, global problem, where you're going to have to combine things. So in order for you to grow at speed and scale, you need to truly embrace partnerships. That allows you to de-risk projects, so that allows you also to move a lot faster. But I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of us have is capital, right? Most of these solutions are super capital intensive, right? So you need to be able to access the capital, whether it's through VC funding, whether it's through grants, and so on and so forth, because every one of the companies or ideas that are out there deserves the time to test the science. And I think part of that mindset, going back to the first point, is that you need to be able to focus on solutions, as they're saying in this entire conference, right? It's taking science, basic science, applied science, to engineering, to then industrialization. That's the only way we're going to get there, and it needs to happen fast.
Yeah, those are such thoughtful responses, and I can imagine a lot of other startups in the industry too face similar challenges. And it's really great to hear about the collaboration involved too in solving these difficulties. So while being creative in these solutions, it's integral that we continue to develop in a way that is responsible. So with that in mind, and as ocean-based CDR deployment takes place, we can ask how it can happen responsibly in a way that benefits and has discussions with local communities. So Planetary has greatly spearheaded efforts on this. So I'd like to ask Pete. Planetary has been holding town halls and working on community engagement. So what have you been learning from this process?
So we have been working on community engagement at each of our project sites, and I'm struck by these beautiful animals that are all around us. They really draw out for me a connection to the ocean and a connection to the sea. And all of the communities in which all of us work have that same connection. And so I think it's incumbent upon us to honor that connection and remember that connection. Whenever we say, oh, we're here to help, people perhaps may wonder about unintended consequences, or they may not even be trusting of organizations that are coming from the outside. And so as part of our code of conduct and as part of just the way that we do business, we do want to interact with those individual project sites. I mean, if you want to talk about it from our point of view, from their point of view, it's the place where they live and where they swim and where they surf. So we have conducted a bunch of individual meetings and group meetings and public information sessions and information on our blog. And I think that we all know how to do that communication. The three pieces of advice that I would give to each of us, other than remember that we're really guests at their site, regardless of whether you're near to the coast or whether you're further offshore. First of all, work with the community, start early, build trust. That's super important because they don't know you and they don't have necessarily a reason to trust you. Second of all, concentrate especially on people whose living depends on the ocean. Because when you have a strong connection to the ocean and it's also your paycheck, it's a double motivator to have things stay the same, even though we know that they're under attack. And then the third thing is try to build champions. And those champions might not be local governments. As a matter of fact, local governments or central governments, regulatory bodies may not be trusted. And so find universities or local ecological, environmental kind of foundations or charities, work with them, really listen to them and change your plans based on that.
Thank you. And as we continue to look at gaps in the ecosystem, I would like to ask Max with Running Tide. Running Tide has taken a lead on developing a measurement, reporting, and verification methodology. Can you talk a bit about how this is engaging with communities and other things that you found it's helping with responsible deployment?
Absolutely, sure. So I definitely to echo a lot of what people have said here about that, that mind shift switch. In order to deploy these projects, right, you need, obviously, a lot of these things are capital intensive. The interventions themselves are capital intensive, and then any kind of like MRV system that you want to develop, obviously, as we've seen today, putting machinery in the ocean, getting data about good, reliable data sources, whether it's integrated in situ sensors with satellites, et cetera, is a huge industrial and expensive lift. A lot of that needs to be motivated by this kind of permission to operate, some sort of clear regulatory framework that allows these things to be explored and to scale. And obviously the ability to connect funding to the work kind of depends on that too. So, I think that when we look at this problem, we see this sort of like constellation of big challenges. A way that I think that Running Tide has approached trying to think about, how to move forward in the face of this constellation of sometimes abstract and always overwhelming challenges, is to say, look, ocean CDR is never going to be perfect, and it's never going to even be like fully ready in whatever sense that might mean. There's so many things about the ocean that we don't know, and so there are so many things about ocean CDR that we don't know. And when you say this to people, I think we all sort of think, well, that maps into saying, we aren't ready to do this. And I think the question that begs is just sort of like, ready for what exactly? I was talking to Eric Siegel this morning about how there are so many like individual kind of blocks that have to be put together here. It's like you've got your MRV system, your intervention system, your LCA, your overall cost of carbon, your environmental impact assessment. And I think what Running Tide is trying to do is sort of demonstrate that all of these individual pieces are right now sort of ready enough to be integrated into some sort of minimum viable kind of end-to-end test, end-to-end delivery of the system. And let's just start there. We can do that without making taking huge ecological risks. We can do that without taking huge financial risks, and we can deliver something that will be, functional to the marketplace without being perfect. And I think that if as an industry, as a community, we can understand that there's like a place where we're starting and a place that we will go, and I think that most of the people in this room are aligned with that. That's sort of the way to chart that path forward. One foot in front of the other, because I just think that it's the work here is never going to be done, and so we can't kind of wait to finish it in order to start it.
Absolutely, I agree too. And I work with startups from around the world in a variety of CDR types, and it's really so nice to hear that like so many are thinking about MRV. They are thinking about earning trust with communities and actually having those interactions and discussions at the forefront as we continue to develop the carbon removal space. I would like to open this question actually to the audience, if anyone else, to our panel, if any of our other panelists have thoughts on, scaling responsibly.
Yeah, so just one thing to add on the community engagement and the scaling piece. I think it's actually really, EB has started early engagement with communities affected by ocean acidification as part of our process. We collectively, as a new field, actually have an opportunity to get it right from the beginning, right, which is pretty rare. And that includes the community engagement piece and the scientific basis piece. So I think it's daunting, the scale. We need to scale for sure, and it's the scale of it is daunting, but we need to scale the right thing, right? We don't want to scale the wrong thing. So now is the time to like lay the groundwork, both on community engagement, on scientific basis, to make sure the thing we're scaling is the right thing.
Thank you. And if you are interested in hearing more about MRV and the ocean-based CDR space, the following panel after us will also be covering MRV topics. So with that, and with ever more information on the ocean-based CDR space, it's great to know that the CDR community, like said today, is continuing to work on centering responsible deployment into discussions and different parts of internal planning processes. So Steve and Matt, what would you say are your thoughts on the biggest policy and other opportunities to continue scaling the ocean-based CDR industry and to ensure a level playing field for companies? Big ask, but you've got this.
Yeah, I mean, I think policy is one of the biggest challenges to scale, but also one of the biggest opportunities. So one is incentives. An example being tech neutral legislation, or making sure it's outcome-based legislation, right? So if we're passing legislation or have policy, intended to incentivize carbon removal, it makes absolutely no sense that it would be targeted to only some subset of approaches, but rather it should be geared toward the outcome itself. 45Q is an example that is only applicable to a certain subset of carbon dioxide removal approaches, and that's too bad, right? So going forward, trying to make sure that policy is tech neutral and outcome based. And I think another one is permitting. So I think to scale, like the permitting structure we have to go through now is fine, that is what it is, but it wasn't designed for this field. It's a completely new field, and if it's really going to scale to gigatons, if we find the right thing and decide that's what we want to scale and it can solve the problem, I think we will need permitting structures specific to carbon dioxide removal.
Thank you.
I'm glad you saved me a couple. I was worried you were going to say all of them. So I'll add another 2 or 3 things. Mindset. Mindset's a really important thing for the whole carbon removal industry. I have a really simple concept. I did math at school. If you're trying to get to 0, 1 plus minus 1 also gets to 0. So if it's too expensive, too disruptive, too time consuming to stop your emission at source, allow it to be removed. 1 plus minus 1 also equals 0. So having that mindset in legislation, in policy, in public awareness, I think is really important. Because to be blunt, I don't think we're stopping our emissions as a society anytime soon. So we better accept removal. Number 2, policy, everything Matt said, should be outcome-based. 45Q should allow for solutions that do the same thing as direct air capture. And that's hopefully a battle that our industry will win over time. Number 3, customers. So important. There is no business without customers. So organizations that have a carbon footprint, airlines, steelmaking, all these organizations that have long-haul trucking, shipping, that have a challenge in removing their carbon footprint, step forward and buy carbon removal in the early days and choose the solutions that have the lowest cost of production. Because no matter what the price of carbon is going to be in the future, because none of us know, none of us can predict that. If you've chosen the solution that has the lowest cost of production, you're going to be in the best situation. And technologies like what you've heard here today that use the ocean is enormous, it's available, and it's free. So using the ocean makes a great deal of sense. So I think those would be my sort of top 3 issues for scaling. I think companies like ours that use scale, that use the ocean, scale is less of a technical challenge. You know, at Captura, we have no absorbance, we add no chemistry, we put nothing in the ocean. As a result, we think our solution is very scalable today, and there are other solutions across the table here that are exactly the same. So it's not really a technical limitation on scaling. Mindset, customers, policy, those are the key things.
Thank you. Yeah, Alex and I were just talking earlier about economies of scale and lowering costs. And I think too, on the policy front, it'll be important for us to keep in mind how we can continue to ensure and consider how to make a level playing field on local, statewide, and national policies. So with this in mind, with costs, as a last question to the panelists before we open it up to questions, what do you all think it would take to bend the technology cost curve of ocean-based CDR? Beyond what was said, if there's any other final comments on it, open to the whole panel.
So costs will come down when you've got volume, right? And then we see that throughout the playing field. But because we're so early in the cycles, right, you need to have partners, investors, and others that are willing to take the risk so that you can actually start to scale up. That's when you're going to see the individual costs, let's say, starting to come down, right? And we've seen that in all industries, right? And so I think we can do a mirror image of that in this particular space. Because as you said before, it's not really about the technology, it's all these other things that are there, right? And so what you also got to do is you got to take risk out of the equation, right? And that has a lot to do with education. So for example, in order to deploy an open ocean aquafarm or a nearshore aquafarm, you're going to need permits. And the people that are managing today permits in the different island governments or so, they just don't know. So part of our job as a community here is to basically reach out to them, educate them. You have to come up with a different way of issuing permits. I mean, little things like that add a huge amount of time, complexity, et cetera, to our projects, right? So we need to be very proactive in the community so that we have people on the other side of the aisle that says, oh yeah, this is something that we got to do. So getting that social license is also as important, or building the communities, as I was saying before.
I would just jump in and say education of the public in general, mindset has been mentioned. This idea that the ocean is an important component of the overall carbon removal industry. As I mentioned before, the ocean has the potential for much greater than DAC in terms of carbon removal, 100 gigatons, as opposed to only 40 gigatons for DAC is what the state of carbon removal report just said. But most of, we are in this environmental carbon removal oceans bubble, and the world at large doesn't, half the people don't, well, not half, many people don't believe in climate change. People who do believe in climate change may not believe in carbon removal. People who do believe in carbon removal may be thinking BECS or DAC. So we need to get oceans to be a thing. And so I would ask us all to become advocates for ocean carbon removal.
Thank you, Pete. So with that, if we could do a final 1-minute rapid fire of your key takeaways. Alex, we'll go ahead and start with you. Any other things on helping like the ocean-based CDR industry, and yeah, final thoughts.
Awesome. Yeah, I think there's one thing that's both a challenge and opportunity, and that's talent. This is a really challenging problem, and we need the best brains, scientists, engineers, thinkers working on this. And I know that we've been lucky at Biennial, and I've seen the recruiting of my colleagues' companies here to get some of the great minds that are available in the field working at each of our firms. But we're going to, as this scales up, as our companies scale up, as new ones are formed, as new innovations come down the pipe, there's going to need a real need for talent. And so I think that's a challenge for us to sort of develop and make sure that we're bringing people up. And I also think that one of the lures of this, the way that we bring people in, is because there's a real opportunity to have impact here. People really crave being able to use their skills to be able to have impact. And so I think that's a place that we're going to need to be conscious about growing. And I think as we were queuing up on the stage, I think we were all a little gassed by our demographics when we looked at each other. And so I think a really important part of that pipeline and training and raising people up is, to get us to a point where the next time we have a talk like this, that we have a much more sort of diverse representation on stage.
Making a strong debut here. My takeaway would be to say this is not a technology problem. We do not need like a breakthrough to perform ocean CDR through any of these pathways. The work that needs to be done here is the work of normal science and normal engineering. Industries know how to make these types of improvements. We will get better over time as we build this. We need to start. And right now we're hamstrung by starting because of permitting, because of regulation. And the regulatory reaction is very much not commensurate with any of the projects that are being proposed up here today in terms of scale, magnitude, size, implication. There's this disconnection. And I think just understanding that this is a one foot in front of the other, start here, we will work together to figure out what this looks like as it gets built. But we need to start.
I think I would have two takeaways. One is just to make sure we try and level the playing field again on the policy side, make sure it's outcome-based and that we have a permitting structure that allows us to succeed. And then the second one is also related to something I said, which is we have the opportunity to get it right. So let's get it right. Let's continue. I'm really pleased to see, I think so far, a lot of the companies, MRV leads are talking with each other and working with the scientific community to do really rigorous MRV and not make some of the mistakes that other fields have made. So let's keep that at a high level of rigor. And I think if we lay a good foundation, then we can scale the right thing.
So I'm going to go back to what I said before. It sounded like a little broken record, but I think it's important. 10x mindset for speed and scale, partnerships and building community, because we're building basically a new industry, and access to capital. That'll get us there.
I think my main takeaway is don't sit at the wrong end of the panel when you have to name one key takeaway. Thinking out of the box here, I think my main takeaway would be, I heard it said this morning, we're competing for the X Prize. I'm sure lots of these other companies here are, and I wish you all the best with the runners-up slots. No, my main takeaway would be, in the X Prize rules, it's really good. It says you can remove from the atmosphere or from the ocean. The implication being very clear, it's the same. We've heard this constantly from speakers here. You remove CO2 from the ocean water will draw it down from the atmosphere. It's obvious maybe to everybody in this room. It is completely not obvious to the financial and the customer community and the investor community. So all of the scientists, all the policymakers, all the NOAA people and DOE people here advocating for and emphasizing that main point will be revolutionary, because inherently using the ocean is going to be lower cost. So if we can all buy into the idea, the fact that removal from the ocean is the same as removal from the air, we'll create a massive new business, and we'll provide the people of the earth with hope that we can actually fix climate change.
Within our ocean bubble, the thing that I would like to mention to accelerate is the breaking down of barriers, partnership. We are trying to create an industry that is 3 times the size of the oil and gas industry within the next 15 or 20 years. The only way that we will be able to do that is if we all are able to stand on each other's shoulders. And I mean that in a very good way, not climbing up over each other, but helping each other up. So for all of us in all of our different chosen paths or chosen ways where we're helping, to make your work public, to look for, when you have the chance, you have to stay within your lane and excel at your job. But when you get a chance, look for other things that might help you accelerate your work, and then call on people. Find individuals within this room who share an interest. Find someone with whom you can partner and accelerate both of your efforts. And so that idea of working together, I think is one of the only ways that we'll be able to achieve the objectives that we need to. And there are lots of good examples that are happening. We just have to continue to do it. It's not a natural thing for any of us as companies to reach outside and reach out to another company to say, hey, can you help me with this? Or, hey, I have this, do you need it? It's not natural, but I would encourage us all to look for opportunities to do that.
Yeah. I love that spirit of collaboration. And I think, it is so key at this moment too. Like, we have such a daunting climate crisis. And so it's great to hear these areas for collaboration, community engagement, and continued scaling of startups at the forefront of really helping make a climate difference. And I think, really, like, think about this, like, we should take these 1-minute takeaways, just put them in a Twitter thread and help put out into the public. But really, thank you all so much for being here today and for your own contributions in the ocean-based space. With that, I would like to open questions to the audience. If you have a question, please feel free to come to one of the microphones.
Hi. Over here.
Oh, hello. Sorry, I saw someone else coming up.
Brad Ack with Ocean Visions. This is more of a comment. We did some research on perceptions of opinion leaders in the ocean and the climate and the policy space about this topic. And I think the findings are instructive. People are not where we are on this. And it's really important when we're communicating about this to communicate about the uncertainty and the risk and recognize that people are concerned about that. And not to talk first, not to lead first with the business opportunity. That is just from the research we did with a very skilled public communications research firm interviewing people who are going to be in the position of making decisions. That doesn't work. So I think it's really important, and also to lead with the ocean. We're doing this, at least many of us in this room, because the ocean needs it, not because the ocean can do this for us. So that's an important little flip, right? That this is actually critical for the health of the ocean and the health of the planet. And we're in the realm of choosing least bad alternatives right now. I think somebody already said that. There's no silver bullet, there's no good alternative. Every single alternative is going to have costs. So we're in a race to find the least cost alternatives. And so framing it with some humility and a little bit of uncertainty and talking about the critical questions that have to be answered goes a long way to moving people into the camp of wanting to see those questions answered, just for consideration.
Thank you, Brad.
Hi, thanks for a very interesting presentation. I have a quick question for the seaweed people on the panel. The two of you, have you thought of any opportunities that might be had by the fact that there's an enormous pile of seaweed heading towards Florida, Mexico, and Central America, that people would rather not be on their beaches? I mean, it's a huge amount, more seaweed than you've been growing, I'm sure. And then a more general question is, I was driving my electric car to the airport. I heard this reminder that cell phones are only 50 years old. Well, that's actually seems only maybe isn't quite the right adjective, but when the first cell phone call was made, it was made on a device that weighed 2 pounds, and its battery lasted only 25 minutes, and it was just a telephone. So I was wondering if, even though you have to hedge your enthusiasm when you're talking to policymakers, if you could give us a sense of where you think you might be, not in 50 years, but in 10.
All right, I'll start with the first part of your question. And that's something that we've looked at actually quite carefully. And when we think of how do we get to very large scale open ocean aqua farms, there's multiple steps that you have to do to get there. And so the first step is to catch and grow. So the idea is, if you would have barriers that are long enough, strong enough, you could actually capture some of that sargassum that's coming in before it actually reaches the coast and starts to decompose. So that's something that we're looking at very, very carefully, and that we're actually testing barriers in order to do that, right? But it's a huge undertaking, right? So we got to go stepwise, let's say, to do it. And I think most of the island nations that we've talked to, they're very open to this, because for them it's a big problem, right? It kills tourism. It generates all sorts of let's say, on-island issues that need to be addressed. And so this is one more potential solution to help them with their problems. Yeah.
Can I do the crazy techno-optimism one? Okay, so carbon moves through the Earth system as a cycle, right? And it's moving through these, like, the fast cycle, and then it gets sequestered into the slow cycle. And what we're trying to do when we amplify these natural processes, tap into that cycle and accelerate, the transfer from the fast cycle to the slow cycle. But that's limited. These things are, all of these things are, these biogeochemical cycles are intertwined with each other, as I'm sure we all know. It takes nitrogen to fix carbon. It takes sugar from carbon to power nitrogen fixing bacteria. So there's like these closed systems, and they get subsidized by sunlight, and that's why there's something that we can take out of it and bury. So I guess my glorious vision of the future is that we've gone into all of these natural systems, and we are really we have found a technological and ecologically integrated way of amplifying them, such that they feed each other, and we are able to sort of provide for the base of these food webs and have enough, carbon and the other things that we want. Carbon in the form of carbon to be sequestered, carbon in the form of energy that we can burn, carbon in the form of sugar that we can put into bioreactors to eat, coming out of it. So that's sort of, I guess, what I would hope is the sort of glorious outcome of this green economy. And I guess on the financial policy side, maybe one day there will be like a price of carbon tax that's set by, like the Fed funds rate, like by a bunch of bureaucrats, and they're kind of like changing it every year and heating up and cooling down the economy and, thinking about it in this integrated, regulated way. But whatever, we can dream, I guess.
Thank you, Max.
Hi, my name's Alex. I'm with IndieBio. We're an early stage climate and biotech investor. I have like a comment and a question together. So we are very early stage in cultivated meat and biomanufacturing. And I kept thinking of one of your comments, how nothing that you all are doing is like technically impossible or even like that difficult to just engineering. And a lot of biotech is still like dealing with things that are called technically impossible, but have got a lot of policy, PR, and like investor recognition. And I think part of that has been with 8 years prior to regulatory approval, companies banded together, created common vocabulary, and started talking to USDA, FDA, and other policymakers and regulatory bodies. And this year had the first ever FDA approval for that. So I'm wondering, how are you as a group, and also like with your fellow peers who aren't here, talking about like creating industry coalitions, lobbies, and having conversations with policymakers and regulators far in advance to when you actually are at a deployment stage, if that's happening?
Yeah, I mean, essentially that's starting to happen. So sort of to my point about outcome-based, I think just trying to, as a group, push for outcome-based legislation and along those lines as a group. And also on the measurement and verification, like many of the companies basically working together. So I think my take, and I think this is shared among others, is that the measurement and verification piece will have to be transparent and can't be just within a company proprietary. And so that's open. And so that's an easy place where basically we can all collaborate along with the scientific community. And if we don't do that, I think it won't be trusted. And that's
Sorry to interrupt. Can I ask, maybe to be more specific, are you as a group like going to DC and actually speaking to people in regulatory bodies or senators or other people? Because what you're describing to me sounds all like within really technical
so
fields.
among those things that has occurred, maybe I'll let Steve or somebody down the other end have a...
Yeah, actively. I personally take some of the blame for the fact that the 45Q is direct air capture specific, because I used to work for a direct air capture company, and there you go. So no, we are very actively doing that. I was actually with Matt October, November in DC. So yeah, it's education. The US is pretty fractured politically right now, and so finding a way to appeal to both sides of the House or the Senate is really important, and I think carbon removal fits. I think that's an area where it makes sense that we can appeal to both sides. So yes, very active, and to be honest, a lot more work to come in that area.
I'd hop in here too. I am with the Carbon Business Council. We are a nonprofit trade association of more than 80 carbon management companies in the space, almost all of which are carbon removal oriented. So we together do work on like policy formation, and I think it really is, like we've been saying today, an excellent time for collaboration. It's really important to really take a portfolio approach at this time, and I think continuing to center things like diversity, equity, inclusion, and other policies or aspects like that into policies as we continue to develop this nascent industry. And I think it's exciting. There's so much more to do, but we have such impressive ideas up here today, and so I'm hopeful. And so I hope that too helps answer part of your question, that there are policy groups out there and people really working on making sure that this is responsible. So next question, please.
Hi, so cool to hear about all the stuff you guys are doing. So you guys talked a lot about engaging different communities. You talked a lot about reaching outside to get collaborators. I was just wondering if you could talk to some successful experiences you've had with engaging the broader scientific community, or say the ocean observing community. Or if you haven't, what have you felt have been the biggest barriers toward that? And I believe it was Running Tide. You guys are going to do something with Ocean Networks Canada. Is that right? So that sounded pretty cool. But just, in general, how have you guys felt in terms of engaging with the broader community? Oh, and I'm with the Deep Ocean Observing Strategy, so you can see why I'm asking you this question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start and I'll go quick because I know I've spoken a lot. But yeah, the answer is yes. I think that we've been very happy and very eager to engage with researchers, whether they're individual scientists or institutions. And I would say, someone mentioned earlier, it's important to break down barriers inside this carbon removal room. And I would say I think a lot of those barriers are non-existent. We've been very excited with the level of interest, and we've engaged in a lot of different research collaborations, and we are hungry for more of them. I do think probably the next step is some sort of more coordinated action between, the Carbon Business Council as a unit and the scientific community a little bit more writ large. But I think that we're bootstrapping our way there, and I think when we look around this room, there are so many people actively thinking about that. This ball will continue to roll, I think.
Yeah, same here. So we've partnered with NOAA, with Seaworthy, and I'll talk a bit tomorrow about some of our results from the partnership with NOAA. But yeah, that's a huge benefit to us, and it's ongoing.
And from the beginning, what we did is some of the ideas and concepts that were used to build sea fields came from Dr. Victor Shemacek, but we've got, let's say, Mar Fernandez, who's supposed to be sitting here today, and Fran Elmer and others, and our company is based in the UK, but we're very, very close to the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany, and to GeoMar, and to others. And so I see that because these are nature-based ideas, and they're very heavy on the science, it's a natural thing to engage with research institutions. So we've created a very nice science advisory board, and people that are excited about what we're doing. They're finally seeing, in some cases, a life work come to fruition. And it's not just stuck in a lab or an idea, but actually, a whole community, a whole industry is being built, and they want to be part of it. And I think that goes back to building those partnerships and actually being here and talking to people and meeting them. I think it's super important.
So I'm going to be a wee bit more controversial. Sorry, guys. I'd like to see more from the ocean academic community. The points that we were making earlier on, that the ocean is an extremely effective carbon removal device. Removal from the ocean equals removal from the atmosphere. These points are not understood in the wider world. When you do market research, Brad just talked about market research being important. One of the things that comes across is the voice of scientists is more trusted than nasty businessmen like me and other people. So it's really important for the science community to stand up and advocate, look into the solutions that are available, reach out from academia to companies coming up with good ideas, ask them tough questions, validate the pathways that people are producing, and come out and endorse them and say, these pathways are good, because we need that body of science. This, we talked earlier on about this needs to be a different industry than some of the other industries of the past. Science-led is important, but it only works if the science community steps up. So I'd like to see more. Sorry to be blunt, but you did ask.
No, but let me tell you something. I agree with you 100%. And I think it's that transparent, open communication that's important. But also I think you do find some people that totally oppose what we're trying to do, right? And it's good to have an open debate, but not to try to destroy something just because you don't like that idea, right? And so it has to do with good communication, good debate, being transparent about it, and being accountable at the end of the day.
I would like to echo your call for speed and additional involvement. One of the big challenges that the academic world, I'm not from the academic world, so my perception of the challenge that the academic world faces is the historical pace is different than the historical pace of business. And candidly, it's different than the current urgency that the climate crisis calls on us. We do have to, as a community, figure out what is strong enough science. It may not be the same as it used to be, or we may need to figure out how to quicken the pace of research, collaboration, and peer review. I don't know, but we need to figure out how to go faster as well as more on the academic side. Maybe it's just more volume, which calls for more money. Maybe it's a difference in process. I'm not sure what it might be.
Yeah, it definitely is a time for creativity, especially so that we can continue to grow the industry, but then as well, making sure that, we are growing companies too. So with that, are there any final questions from the audience?
I've got some Zoom questions on deck if we have
Okay.
time, but
Yeah,
maybe I should just start with one.
Yeah, one or two, I think, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, can you comment on how your technology or system interacts with the ocean ecosystem and how you ensure positive or, in the worst case, neutral impacts?
I'll go first and make it quick. So in our case, we have carbonate chemistry sensors in the mixing zone where the alkalinity is dispersed. And the other point to make is it's already alkalinity mixed with seawater. So it's then you have some target conditions. So target maximum pH, turbidity, and so on in that region. And those are feedbacks to the system. So in our case, we can turn the system off or ramp the current up and down in tens of seconds. So it's essentially real-time feedback on those metrics. And all that said, it should actually be beneficial to marine life, especially shell-forming organisms, but that feedback exists nevertheless.
Can I make a suggestion? Because I think that's a really wide-ranging question. Just come and talk to us. Come and talk to my company. Come and talk to any
These
of
are
these guys.
questions from Zoom participants, so
Yeah.
sorry, it's not actually me.
Yeah, it does feel like
Email-
each one of us
email
could
them.
talk for
Yeah.
25
It-
minutes about that, though.
Exactly. Yeah. It's a long answer for any of us.
All right, then let's move on to the next one, shall we?
Yeah, we'll take this as like a final question.
Yeah, so, and I'm going to combine a few questions here. People were asking about, I guess there was one company that mentioned that they're selling carbon credits. And so what does the path forward look like for blue carbon credits? And this kind of wraps into another question about what is the product that people will pay for? Is it just carbon credits?
So Running Tide is has sold carbon credits to some of the advanced market commitments, Stripe, Shopify, and Microsoft. As I mentioned earlier, our process right now is just sort of demonstrating that minimum viable end-to-end chain. Our product is carbon removal credits. I think to the point that Matt made earlier, a carbon removal credit is like this interesting financial instrument. It's not a scientific instrument. It's not it's about risk transfer. Somebody has a carbon liability that they've created, and so we've invented this instrument to financialize it and move it around to a carbon removal company who can take it away, which is super weird, and there are a lot of things about carbon removal credits that are not perfect, and I think we should all acknowledge that. But this is the way that we've decided to solve the foundational problem of connecting capital and resources to the technology and industrial effort of carbon removal. But I was going to say one of the most important things about carbon removal credits is that they're a trust-based instrument. So that's what calls for this sort of transparency and the need for auditing and the need for documentation of best available science, consensus, and like a clear methodology. So that's the path that we're on right now. And we expect year over year to scale the amount of trust that's available in the product and the volume of the product that we can produce.
If you've talked to the leads for carbon purchasing at, as I'm sure all of us have, at firms like Microsoft, Amazon, Stripe, many of these other places that are also doing some of these advanced purchases, they say that they value high quality carbon removal, easy to verify carbon removal. And one of the things that really comes clear is that they have budgets to make these carbon removal purchases, but there's not enough supply in the industry or enough capacity to supply that demand. So there is a market there, and we're trying hard to build up that capacity for both business purposes, but also to help avoid some of the most dangerous aspects of climate change.
So I'll just add to that. I think, I fully agree with both of you. I mean, we're in a similar, let's say in a similar space. I think that as these projects get rolled out, in addition to carbon credits, you're going to be able to extract, for example, feedstock. And that then gets passed down in the value chain. And there's companies that are focusing and taking that feedstock and creating products or bioethanol, or they're looking at let's say, other replacements of fossil fuels that you can actually do with the feedstock that you get. So you're going to have at least two sources of revenue, if not three, by the carbon credits on one side and then the feedstock for products on the other.
Definitely. I see Nikhil here, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. But honestly, I've been so moved by the thoughtful responses by our panelists today. So thank you so much, and I look forward to continue to see your successes and development as you all grow, and as we all work together towards gigaton scale carbon removal and restoring the Earth. And so with that, thank you, and we'll go to a quick break from here. Stay tuned. The next panel is going to be Alicia Karspeck of Seaworthy and Silver Lining, and a discussion about ocean-based CDR and MRV. So thank you so much again to everyone today. If everyone could come back at 4 p.m., we will resume.